This warship breaks every rule, and it's human. The Galactic Accord prided itself on stability. For 10,000 years, war had been regulated, sanitized. Ships were built according to strict classifications. Engagements followed doctrine, and conflicts were settled before they began. It was a system that ensured balance, predictability, control. Then Sovereign appeared. The first reports were dismissed as sensor ghosts, an anomaly near the border of Zalari space. Then came the transmissions, garbled, unreadable, and dense with encryption no known race could crack. Patrol fleets were sent. None returned. Admiral Carell of the Zalari Empire stood aboard the Vanguard Eternal, watching the latest long-range scans. The object was massive, larger than a dreadnought, but with a profile unlike any warship in known history. No heat signatures, no standard engine trails, no discernible shield harmonics. It was a ghost, moving through space without a sound, defying everything the Accord understood about warfare. "This is a human vessel?" Carell asked, his tendrils twitching with unease. "The humans deny all knowledge of it," his intelligence officer replied. "But it bears their design principles: angular hull, aggressive symmetry, redundant systems. And the name, it's in their language. That name, in stark Terran script, burned across the hull. Sovereign." Carell turned back to the display, narrowing his eyes. Humans were young, ambitious, reckless, but they were not fools. If they had built this ship, it was not for show. A diplomatic envoy was dispatched. A single response returned, short and unmistakable: leave or be removed. The Accord was not in the habit of being threatened. Carell gathered his fleet, 40 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts, more than enough to pacify an out-of-line species. The human ship was alone. No support. No reinforcements. It should have surrendered the moment they arrived. Instead, it advanced. No broadcast, no warning, no attempt at negotiation. Just motion. Smooth, controlled, purposeful. The Vanguard Eternal locked on, its targeting arrays tracking for weaknesses. There were none. Every known ship had gaps in its armor, exposed conduits, predictable shield cycles. Sovereign had none. Carell ordered a standard engagement formation, spread the fleet, forced the human ship into a crossfire. The moment they moved, the impossible happened. The Sovereign vanished. Not a jump, not a distortion, just gone. No drive signatures, no residual energy, nothing. A void where it had been. His fleet hesitated. In that single moment of uncertainty, it reappeared right behind them. The first ship to die never even fired a shot. A Zalari battleship, armored for planetary sieges, split apart in a single, precise cut. Not an explosion, not a kinetic impact. Something had sliced through it as if it were paper. Weapons fire erupted across the fleet. Energy bolts lanced toward the human warship, but they struck empty space, holograms, projected in real time, shifting the enemy's perceived position every millisecond. Then Sovereign fired. Carell had seen dreadnought cannons, plasma lances, fusion torpedoes. He had never seen this. The first volley wasn't energy, it was kinetic. Thousands of hyper-accelerated projectiles, moving faster than any shield could react. They ripped through Accord ships before impact alarms even triggered. Hulls buckled, decompressed, shattered. And then the secondary wave hit. AI-guided drones, smaller than fighters but faster, each one equipped with weapons designed for surgical destruction. They slipped between shields, found reactor cores, carved through command centers with brutal efficiency. Carell tried to adapt, calling for evasive maneuvers. The Accord had protocols for every type of engagement, but none accounted for a warship that broke every fundamental rule of combat. Every action he took, every countermeasure he deployed, had already been anticipated. This was not war. It was demonstration. He sent a final transmission to the human vessel. Not a demand, not a threat. A question. "What are you?" For the first time, Sovereign responded. The voice was human, calm, unshaken. A warning. Carell's fleet was shattered in minutes. The survivors fled, not because they were ordered to retreat, but because they had no other option. The Sovereign did not pursue. It simply drifted, watching, waiting. It had made its statement. Humanity did not play by the rules. Admiral Carell had fought 100 battles, commanded fleets against insurrections, and crushed rebellions before they could take root. He had never known fear in war. But Sovereign was not war. It was something else entirely. The Accord had sent reinforcements, double the original fleet, with a Zalari warlord personally overseeing the engagement. Every species in the Accord had contributed ships. This was not just about humanity. This was about control. The balance of power could not be disturbed by a single rogue warship. Orders were clear. Sovereign would be destroyed. The fleet surrounded the vessel, forming an iron net. It was an old strategy, used against high-mobility targets to restrict movement and force surrender. No ship, no matter how advanced, could evade an encirclement of this scale. Then Sovereign did what should have been impossible. It accelerated instantly. No inertia lagged, no propulsion buildup. One moment, it was trapped. The next, it was outside the perimeter, turning to face the Accord fleet with quiet contempt. The Zalari warlord barked an order. The fleet opened fire. Energy weapons, torpedoes, kinetic rounds, everything was unleashed at once. It was overwhelming, a barrage that could reduce planets to slag. The space where Sovereign had been was obliterated in a storm of destruction. But when the light cleared, it was still there, untouched. Shields? No. There were no visible deflection barriers, no absorption fields. The weapons had passed straight through the ship, or rather, through where the ship had been milliseconds before impact. It wasn't just dodging, it was predicting. The Accord's best minds had studied probability matrices, combat algorithms, predictive AI. Nothing functioned at this speed. Nothing reacted faster than an attack. And then it attacked. There was no main cannon, no superweapon. Just ruthless, optimized efficiency. The first Accord battleship lost power in an instant, not from a direct hit, but from a precision strike to its reactor coolant lines. The second lost navigation as Sovereign deployed micro-drones that latched onto external thrusters, forcing an uncontrolled spin. The third ship simply ceased to exist, a perfect, clean cut through the hull, severing the command deck from the rest of the vessel as if it had been sliced by an unseen blade. The fleet adjusted, adapting to new formations. They were learning. It didn't matter. Sovereign was evolving faster than they could react. Holographic projections confused targeting systems. AI-driven countermeasures hijacked communication networks, sending false attack orders. Cloaking fields flickered in and out of existence, turning the battlefield into chaos. One dreadnought captain tried to ram it, pushing engines beyond safety limits. It never got close. Sovereign blinked out of phase, reappearing behind its pursuer, its weapons tearing through the ship's vulnerable rear plating in a single, effortless motion. No wasted shots. No missed opportunities. Every action was precise, devastating, inevitable. The warlord's voice cracked over the comms, desperation bleeding through his usual arrogance. How? This is not possible. A response came, calm and final. You mistake rules for limits. The fleet collapsed. Some ships surrendered outright. Others tried to flee, only to be disabled before their jump drives could engage. A few, the most stubborn, kept fighting until they were erased from existence. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the battle was over. Sovereign stopped. No further attacks. No pursuit. It drifted silently, as if the slaughter had never happened. The surviving Accord captain sent frantic messages, demanding to know why humanity had built this warship. But Sovereign had already given them the answer. Humanity had never been playing their game. 50 years before Sovereign appeared, humanity had faced a choice: submit or disappear. The Accord never issued an outright ultimatum. There were no grand declarations, no threats of war, just quiet, methodical suppression, trade restrictions, technological embargoes, the slow, deliberate suffocation of a species deemed too unpredictable to be trusted with power. At first, humanity tried to negotiate. When that failed, they adapted. The project had no name, no centralized command. It existed in whispers, spread across dozens of hidden facilities on isolated worlds. Scientists worked in isolation. Engineers received only fragments of blueprints. Entire research teams disappeared under the guise of failed experiments. Each piece was built in secret, components smuggled through legitimate supply chains, masked under unrelated defense contracts. Even those who worked on it never saw the whole picture. Not until Sovereign was complete. It wasn't just a warship. It was a statement, a vessel designed not to win battles, but to break the very concept of conventional warfare. It had no single point of failure, no central command bridge, no exposed reactor core. Every system was redundant, every weakness accounted for. It could function indefinitely, self-repairing with molecular-scale construction units. Its weapons weren't just powerful, they were precise. Built not for destruction, but control. To disable, disrupt, dominate. To end wars before they could begin. Every race in the Accord had contributed to its creation without ever knowing it. The kinetic weapons were based on Geatheri siege railguns, but refined to fire at near-light speeds. The cloaking systems adapted from Zalari infiltration tech, improved beyond recognition. The AI combat algorithms were derived from Tvari predictive models, but optimized to a level even their creators wouldn't understand. Humanity had never been at a technological disadvantage. The Accord had assumed humans were behind, when in reality, they had been learning. When the first prototype was completed, the question wasn't whether it worked. The question was what to do with it. Some wanted war, retribution, a demonstration that humanity would not be controlled. But that was never the purpose. The Accord had ruled through structure, hierarchy, the belief that every species had its place. That belief had gone unchallenged for millennia. Until now, Sovereign was never meant to be part of a fleet. There were no others, no reinforcements, no hidden armada waiting to strike. It didn't need them. One warship was enough. Enough to prove that the old rules no longer applied. Enough to make the Accord question everything they thought they knew about power. Enough to force them to make a choice. Because Sovereign would never fire the first shot. But if the Accord refused to change, it would fire the last. The Accord had always assumed control was permanent. That power, once established, could never be questioned. Even after Sovereign shattered their fleets, even after their most advanced warships were reduced to wreckage in a matter of minutes, they still clung to the belief that they could recover. They were wrong. The aftermath of the battle rippled across the galaxy. The Accord's illusion of supremacy had been broken, and with it, the foundation of their rule. Member species that had once feared open rebellion now had proof that the Accord could be challenged, that the impossible was nothing more than an illusion they had accepted for too long. Some demanded retaliation, full-scale war against humanity. But those voices were silenced by cold reality. Every simulation, every war game, every theoretical engagement pointed to the same conclusion. The moment they committed to war, they would lose. Not because of overwhelming numbers, not because of superior firepower, but because they no longer understood the battlefield. The Accord had fought the same way for thousands of years. Battles were predictable, controlled, dictated by doctrine. Sovereign had proven that doctrine meant nothing against an enemy that did not play by the rules. And humanity had made one thing clear. They weren't going to change the way they fought. The Accord's leadership met in secret, debating options, seeking alternatives. But there were none. Every outcome led to the same inevitable realization. They had to negotiate. For the first time in history, the Accord was forced to the table not as rulers, but as equals. The message was sent, a request, not a demand, a summit, not an ultimatum. Humanity's response was simple: talk or don't. The choice is yours. But the era of submission is over. The meeting took place in neutral space, far from any strategic stronghold. No fleets hovered in orbit. No warships lingered in the void. Just representatives, human and non-human, gathered in a chamber where, for the first time, the balance of power was uncertain. The Accord's envoys expected arrogance, demands, concessions extracted through force. They expected humanity to take revenge. Instead, they found pragmatism. Humanity did not seek conquest. They did not demand territory, tribute, or fealty. They demanded change, an end to the old hierarchies, an end to the restrictions that had kept entire civilizations in artificial stagnation, the right for every species to advance on its own terms, without fear of suppression. It was not an easy discussion. Centuries of dominance do not fade overnight. But the Accord's leaders knew they had no alternative. They could fight and be destroyed, or they could adapt and survive. They chose survival. The treaty that followed was unprecedented. It did not dissolve the Accord, but it stripped it of its unchecked authority. Regulations that had once dictated the limits of technological advancement were abolished. Military restrictions that had kept entire species at a disadvantage were lifted. It was not a perfect peace. There were still those who resented humanity, who feared what they represented. But fear no longer dictated the future. And sovereign, it disappeared. Not destroyed, not decommissioned. Just gone. No transmissions, no traces, no confirmed sightings. Some believed it had been dismantled, its purpose fulfilled. Others whispered that it still watched from the darkness, waiting for the day it might be needed again. But the truth was simpler. Sovereign had never been about war. It had never been about destruction. It had been about choice. And the galaxy had finally made the right one.